Hi, I'm Tracy Hellwinkle. I'm with Trees Knoxville, and we are helping the Knoxville Tree Board sponsor. Helping them put on their monthly webinar series. And tonight we have Dan Steinhoff, and he is one of our volunteer foresters and also a member of the Knoxville Tree Board. And he is going to talk to us today about trees at the Botanical Garden. So take it away, Dan.
Thank you, Tracy.
You're welcome.
The trees at the Botanical Garden are pretty interesting. The ones that I've picked out for tonight, you'll find most of them are Oriental sourced, Japan and China in particular. But that was one reason for the Howells when they developed their nursery, was to try to get trees that weren't in people's normal collection. So they aren't, those would be the ones that I'm interested in, at least at this point. So if we look at the Howell Nursery, it first started in 1786. It was the longest running retail organization in the state of Tennessee. At one time, they developed nursery plants for the entire Southeast and had several areas where they could grow the plants. In the 50s, they recognized the need for having a landscape design. And one of the brothers, Joe Howell, kind of broke away from the Cole Bryan Howell, and in his area of the garden built these rock walls. And if you've been there, you've seen those. This is a doorway, kind of interesting. It has one of the roundhouses. You can see the roundhouse there. Everybody can have a square house, but not many people got a roundhouse. So Joe built those specifically so that he'd have areas to showcase his plants. Also, the walls are kind of interesting. If you notice, they're made out of all kinds of different rock. Most of them are sourced from the mountain areas either in Middle Tennessee or up in Kentucky. They started in about 1940. The old office building was completed in 1953 with rock additions. And Joe Howell kept his crew busy in the wintertime by building walls. So that was really kind of a neat thing for him to do. So anyway, that's just a little history. The Howell Nursery started out growing vegetables. They grew fruit trees for people heading west. It was a source, and it was also a source for many of the neighborhoods in Knoxville. At one time, they had an extensive azalea collection. They also sold many different varieties of roses. So this is really the first one that we were looking at, and it's a Japanese umbrella pine. There used to be two in the garden. Now there's only one remaining. It's right next to the office. And if you know where the entrance is to the garden club room, it's down in that area, right next to the building. So it's this tall, skinny one. And you can see actually these are stems, and the leaves are really kind of insignificant. They're real small ones at the base of the green. Those stems are the photosynthesis area of the plant. And they grow in two areas in Japan. Don't see them everywhere. I haven't seen them in many gardens. They're a pretty small tree, 25 to 40 feet tall is about all they get. They're not a very big tree. They're in a fossil record in the Triassic and Permian era. That's about 251 million years ago. So they can find evidence of these plants. So they're kind of interesting. Don't see many of them. And That's the Japanese umbrella pine. These are the cedars of Lebanon. If you have seen all of those programs about British gardens, it looks like just about every one has one of these huge Lebanon type cedar trees in it. These were originally came to the garden in the mid 1860s, and they started out, they used the sap to ease toothache pain. Whoa. So it was kind of a medicinal tree. These particular ones are close to where where the parking lot is. And you can see them all over East Knoxville. They're a really tall tree. These particular ones in this row were said to have been planted about 1900. So that'll give you an idea of the age. Some of them had a pretty tough life. You can see where they've been hit by lightning, but they're really a beautiful tree. So the cedars of Lebanon, kind of neat. If you were into Bible stories, Samson built not only his palace, but the wooden part of the temple was said to have been made out of the wood from cedars of Lebanon. This small English oak was donated to the garden by the Botanical Garden of Edinburgh. And that was kind of a neat place. It was, the Edinburgh Garden was established in 1670. So it's been around for a long time. Kind of the interesting part about the oaks is that you can look at the leaves and you see how the rounded edges are. If you are like me, I'm not an expert, and you can kind of see a big division in the oak. The ones that have the rounded edges on the leaves are in the white oak part of the family, and the ones that have the sharp edges on the leaves would be in the red oak. So that's a starting point. And one problem with oaks is that they'll cross-pollinate, and you get these hybrid oaks that have leaves that you really can't identify, but that's just part of it. So the English oak was donated to the garden about 10 years ago. So the 10-year anniversary is coming up. The English oak is, this particular one is a relatively small oak. It's not like the white oak that grows really tall. The white oak was valued in Britain for masts on sailing ships. Really kind of an interesting tree. So this is our connection with Scotland.
Dude, is this called also a Scottish oak?
Well, I couldn't find out. I think, I don't know really the difference on that, Fred. I'm not really sure. The only thing I could find out is that it was an English oak. There's several of them that are very close when you look at them.
I thought coming from Scotland, it was a Scottish oak, but anyway, I'm not sure if it's the same thing.
Well, I don't know either. So how about that? Not really an expert. I'm just a garden goer. This one you really don't notice, but it's kind of interesting. It's a Cornish elm. Like all of the elm trees, they suffered a lot from Dutch elm disease. So there's not a lot of survivors. And originally, these were planted in fence rows in Cornwall, England, to serve as windbreaks along the western edge of Britain. You get a lot of winds off of the ocean, and this was one way to guard the fields. When the Dutch elm disease came through, it killed most of them. This was kind of interesting. I had known that this was in the garden. This is in that area they call it the sunken garden. It's right off the entrance by the Dogwood Center, except it's down in that kind of, I call it the hole area, but that's where it's located. And it's a single tree. There's only one on the property. Kind of interesting. This next one, and this is really kind of a small tree, but there's some good examples around Knoxville. The yellowwood, and if you have noticed the yellowwood in the springtime when it's blooming, the blooms look almost like grapes hanging from the branches of the tree. Really, really a beautiful tree. Part of the problem with the yellowwood is it's brittle, and you can tell by the way it grows how all of these stems close together, so it can suffer breakage very easily. So it's not a long-lived tree. It's not a very strong tree, but it sure is a beauty when it's blooming. This one I'm sure everybody will recognize, the ginkgo. And it has those fan-shaped leaves. One thing you have to be careful that if you have male and female trees, and you really can't tell, they have to be several years old before the female tree starts to put out fruit. But if you've been along over there by UT in the ag campus, there's a whole row of ginkgos planted, and they're all females. And when they produce fruit in the fall, they don't have a very pleasant odor. But kind of interesting leaf. They're fan-shaped. In the fall, you really get just striking yellow colors. And then all of a sudden, when the ginkgo says it's time to drop the leaves, man, they all come off the tree at the same time. So it's kind of a neat tree. They were sourced in Eastern China in 1784, brought to the US. They've been in the fossil record for about 150 million years. So they've been around for a long time. Some of the extracts, you've heard of Ginkgo biloba. You can take it for improving brain function. It's supposed to be a cure for depression, headaches, memory loss, and tinnitus. So there's all kinds of medicinal purposes that the ginkgo can provide. This is a Chinese parasol tree, and even in the wintertime, if you see these, and it's not real apparent, but the trunks on these three trees will have a green cast. So the bark on that tree is not very thick, and you would expect it to be brown or silver color, but it's a real thin bark and it's mostly green. The interesting part, it has these huge leaves in the summertime. I noticed this week that these trees are listed as invasive trees in Tennessee. So they reproduce easily, and the seeds will go just about everywhere. But they're really kind of an interesting tree because of the trunk color and the size of the leaves. So these are kind of in between by the Dogwood Center. There's the path that goes back through the wall in the Dogwood Centers over to the left. That's where these are located. There's one of these parasol trees in the ash garden, and there's another one over by the urban agriculture area halfway up the hill as you drive up on the left-hand side. This is a really kind of interesting tree, and I've always really thought these are really something. The paper bark maple. They're a small tree, they're not very big, but look at the interesting bark. So in the wintertime, it adds a lot of color to the landscape. They also get some fall color, as most maples. So you have the fall color, plus you have the interesting bark, the exfoliated bark. There was a fellow by the name of E.H. Wilson that helped collect these trees in 1899, and they were available for sale by about 1900. So, you know, they were imported from the Orient, central China, and it's just kind of another interesting tree that isn't really a native, but it sure does add beauty to the garden. So you can see its location. There's the hole in the garden wall, and then just out past this opening is the secret garden. So that'll give you an idea for the location. There's another one of these down along the Dogwood Trail on the left-hand side. Doesn't look like much, but that's a Persian ironwood. It's in the Dania garden, the Danae or Alexandria laurel, Dania racemosa. Those were really kind of a plant that was used in a lot of floral arrangements. The Howells brought them into the garden about 1900. They had attended one of these garden extravaganzas, I guess, in California, and brought the plant to Tennessee. So because of the Dania garden, and that plant came from Iran, when the garden was designed, they put a Persian ironwood at the end of it, kind of honoring the Danae plant. And if you look at the area that's grass, the grass area is shaped roughly the same shape as a leaf. And there's a little kind of a pathway that runs with stone up through the center. And that again is in the shape of the leaf. So the Persian ironwood, there's also a group of those right across the road in that sunken garden area. And they've been there for a long time. It's one of the early trees that gets an early blossom. They're really kind of small and insignificant, but they're one of the early blossoming plants. And they're a relatively small tree. So if you were looking at the height, it'd be 20 to 40 feet high when they're at their maturity, and 15 to 30 feet across. So not a very big tree. I included this one. This isn't really a tree, but it's a woody plant. And if you go to the garden right now, you'll see the blossoms forming on the ends. This picture was taken at the end of February, and the blossoms were open. But right now you'll see them as relatively small blossoms. They're very fragrant. So if you were in the garden, you'd be able to smell the blossoms. So they came from China in about 1845. It's called, a common name is paper bush, Edgeworthia. It's used for paper in China. Hey. This is really kind of my favorite. It's hard to see the tree, but right in the center is the actual dove tree. And then this is a dove tree blossom. It can be called a dove tree, a handkerchief tree. Some people call it a ghost tree. So if you have all of these common names, will really kind of drive you crazy. So if you look at the blossom, you see the two bracts. It's in the dogwood family. And these bracts are about as long as my hand. So if you can imagine that, you really don't get a sense of scale by looking at the picture. And as with the dogwood, the actual blossom there is down in the center. So the dove tree was kind of neat. It was sourced from China again. Started out in 1869. Some of the first examples were collected by a French botanist. And then Henry Wilson was working for Kew Gardens at the time, and that's a big London botanical garden, and was sent to China to see if he could find the dove trees. So he located this big one that they had known about. The problem was the landowner had cut it down. So all that was there was a stump. And he was just really dejected. Eventually did find a group of them growing in a real steep area, and was able to collect some of the samples. As he collected the plants and came back to Britain, their ship had a wreck and went aground, but he was able to continue to save the plants and was made safely back to Kew Gardens. So anyway, that's a dove tree. If you go to many botanical gardens in the springtime, if they happen to have one of these, it's a big event. The dove tree's blossoming, and a lot of people will come and take a look. The Japanese cedar, Cryptomeria, there are so many different kinds of Cryptomeria, but this is the tall upright one. It's the national tree of Japan, which is kind of interesting. And you can see many examples of different Cryptomeria at the UT trial gardens. They have a whole collection of them. Some of them are very small. These are a tall tree, and this would be considered a tall, mature tree. Really pretty, green, as all are in the wintertime. This is kind of an interesting tree, a Katsura. And I'm going to tell you this, and you're not going to believe it. But in the fall, when the leaves start to fall off the tree, you can get a kind of a faint odor. This is really good, of cotton candy. But I get that odor, but my wife can't smell it. Anyway, they turn a nice yellow color. I took this picture relatively late in the year, so they almost are turning. The leaves look a lot like they're heart-shaped, very similar to the redbud. But it's native to Japan and China. And these trees were native to the US until the last ice age. And their range was taken away, and they didn't come back after the ice age. Kind of a neat thing. They're 40 to 60 feet tall when they're mature, and they can be 20 to 30 feet wide. The biggest one of these I saw was up in Boston in a garden. So they get to be a relatively big tree, but I think they're really kind of scenic.
Dan, we had a tree walk last year, 2 years ago, August 29th. I had to look it up. August 29th, 2019, with Joe Cope, who works with the city, and he showed us this tree, and it smelled like cotton candy at the time. It was really great. So, but thanks for putting that up there. I see that I misspelled it on the website. So,
okay, well, the tree location is down at the bottom of the hill. It's in one of those walled areas. That little cottage down at the end by Boyd's Bridge, the garden calls that the Viburnum Cottage, but it's down in that area. As you go down the hill, you'll see the tree off to your left. It's not close to the roadway. It sits back off the roadway some distance. But anyway, it's kind of an interesting tree. The Dawn redwoods, those again were sourced in China. They had seen them in the fossil record, but in the West, we didn't know that they really existed until the 1930s and early 40s. There was a lot of concern that Japan would take China and use it and bring it into their sphere of influence, and they wouldn't be able to collect plants from China. So there was a big effort to go and see if they could collect the Dawn redwood. And nearly every botanical garden has those things. So this is one down in that really close to the Viburnum Cottage. And it's really kind of insignificant. It's surrounded by all kinds of other trees. So you have to kind of look for it. It looks a lot like the cypress. So if you find a tree that looks like cypress, it might be it. And one way you can tell the difference is that the leaves, actually the needle bundles on the Dawn redwood are opposite the stems. So they grow just on either side of the stems. And if you're looking at a cypress, they're alternate. So those are staggered up the stem. And that's really how you can tell the difference in those. They're very similar trees. Over at the Center for Urban Agriculture are some large ones. Those trees were planted about 1960. So they came to the US in the 40s. Nearly every botanical garden in the world has one of these, or several of them. And the ones here that were, I'm not sure when this specific tree was planted, but the ones over at the CB Hall area were planted in the 60s. So give you kind of an idea. The last one that I've got, and you have probably seen this tree, but didn't know what it was the Japanese Zelkova. The city of Knoxville has planted a lot of these as street trees, and there's different varieties of them. There are some, if you're on Summit Hill Drive, get to the intersection that goes to the old city. Can't remember what street that is. But anyway, on the right-hand side, there's some, these are kind of a columnar shaped tree, but those are Zelkovas. There's some planted in the median in Cherry Street. Victor Ashe Park has several Zelkovas planted. So they grow real well in East Tennessee. They're used as street trees. They grow a lot similar to what the elm trees grew. We had kind of a terrible story with the elms because of Dutch elm disease, and just having a single species as a street tree turned out not to be a very good idea. So then what did we do? A lot of the cities turned around and shoot, now I can't even think of the name of the tree that okay, then they planted a lot of ash trees, and here comes the emerald ash borer. So that was, you know, kind of a lesson that we should all know that nature really likes diversity. So if we plant just a single species, we're more than likely going to have a difficult time. So something to keep in mind in your own garden. That's really all the trees that I've got. This is really kind of short. I didn't think I'd get through them that quickly. But I can go back if anybody's got any questions. I hear a lot of silence.
Well, feel free to unmute your mics if you have any questions. I also posted some things in the chat over there that because this is being recorded, so the recorded after I edit it will be on the Trees Knoxville YouTube channel, which is always great, and they're always on our website as well. And I have both those links in the chat. If you cannot unmute yourself, feel free to write something in the chat and I can read it to Dan. And Dan, I do have a question. When did you say that dove tree bloomed?
It blooms about the same time as the dogwoods. So depending a lot on the weather, it could be late March, mid-April. Kind of an interesting thing in that same area, as you go down the hill on this path, there are several different dogwoods, and they're not very big at this time. But that whole collection of dogwoods blooms at different times through the season. So you could have a dogwood blooming from probably late February, early March, all the way into June, because there are different varieties of them growing there. So if you're a fan of dogwoods, it's really kind of interesting to go down and just to look at the collection and see the diversity of dogwoods. One of the dogwoods that was developed here at the Howell Nursery was the one that gets the red blossom. And apparently the Howells were wandering around a forested area, kind of near where Chilhowie Park is, and they found a sport. And when they go sporting, that's when a nurseryman finds something that grows unusual on a regular tree. So they found one that had red blossoms, and they were able to, if you can get trees that have the same characteristics, if you don't go back to a seed, but if you're able to graft them to a rootstock, you'll get a clone of what the tree was that you were looking at. So they're able to get all of these different kinds of growths and small trees that aren't very big. Those are generally clones, and they're reproduced by grafting on a rootstock.
Dan, all these trees that you mentioned in your presentation, are they all tagged with identification?
Some of those are, and some are not.
Right.
They probably not. The ones that were big, there are some that are labeled that at one time had a brochure that had numbers on it and had a numbered post near the tree where you could look at it and tell what it is. Made a real effort in the last few years to label a lot of the plants, but I don't believe that many of these trees are labeled. You might find a little aluminum tag in some of the trees that'll have the scientific name on it, but those were done early on when they were initially cataloging the collection, and most of those have disappeared, but occasionally you'll find them on a tree.
Well, we do have some thank yous in the chat. So to everyone saying thank you, you are welcome. And there is, where is the location where the metasequoia trees are? The Center for Urban Ag is where those are. Is that right, Dan?
That's where the big tall ones are. So
Yeah.
if you're looking for them at the garden, go to the place where the cell towers are and walk down the hill, and you'll see these big evergreen trees. Well, they're not evergreen because those are deciduous, but so you'll have these tall trees that look like evergreens but are really not, and that's where the dawn redwoods are. There's several of them in that area, so they have seedlings have come off of the original plantings. But
It's also where the mule barn is, but it's not called the mule barn anymore. They changed the name
oh
on
no,
that.
they decided to call it something better.
Yeah, there's some beer gardens down there too, and it's where all the community garden plots are. So in
Community
that
garden
area.
plots. There's the
The loop,
Drunken
the,
Botanist Garden.
the loop
So
that
all
you,
of the plants in that garden are ones that were planted so that you could flavor your favorite alcohol.
oh,
Right across on the parking lot is a whole area of medicinal plants. Those were just planted this year, so they're not very tall, but most of those have labels. And go down the hill a little ways and you'll find the pollinator garden, and those are all native plants. In the area, hopefully we can encourage the pollinators. And those aren't really the bees that we're interested in, but it's a small wasps and some of the butterflies and some of the birds. Those are really important pollinators that we don't think about very often. So that's what we're trying to encourage. Some of the plants are plants that they would pollinate. Some of them provide cover. Some of them are plants where the caterpillars would really like to have them. The flitterary butterflies, the caterpillars like the passion flower, and you can see those in the fall. They'll be kind of bright red caterpillars. Boy, do they sure do like the passion flowers and the vines. They'll really feast on the vines.
Nancy here says, not related to the trees in your presentation, but I wondered if there are any chinkapin trees at Knoxville Botanical. For 41 years, I thought I had a chestnut oak, only to find out that it was a chinkapin. I hope I'm saying that right, oak.
The chinkapin, if there is one there, I don't know where it is. And I am not by any means a Quercus expert. There are just too many different oaks. One thing that's kind of interesting about the chinkapin is that the nuts are said to be edible. If you bite an acorn, and I did that one time as a foolishness, they're really kind of bitter, but apparently the chinkapins are. So there might be somebody out there that knows that maybe they've even collected some of the chinkapins.
This is an interesting observation from Charlie, which he says, very interesting overview. Do you happen to know if it's just coincidence that the University of Tennessee Knoxville campus has a lot of trees planted in the 20th century that are from China, Japan, and Korea? Like, could there be a connection to the Howells? It's an interesting observation.
Well, I don't think there is a real connection. If you look at when the trial garden started, that was started about 1890 or so, maybe even a little before that. Part of the big trees, the big oak trees, and the cypress trees that are relatively large along Nayland Drive were part of a forestry project, and that's really how that garden got started. They weren't able to build in that area because the ground stays wet most of the time. So it ended up being a good garden area. And as time went on, it evolved into the garden it is now. So, you know, if there's, there really wouldn't be a Howell connection there because that garden started after the Howells had really gone through their best period. So probably not. There's some areas along Kingston Pike, some of the bigger homes that are planted there. A lot of those plant material came from the Howell nurseries. A lot of the TVA dam sites and TVA parks sourced their plant material in the 30s and 40s from the Howell nurseries. So You know, if you go up to Norris Dam or Cherokee, Douglas, all in our area, some of the older plantings there would have come from the Howell Nursery.
Let's see. I think this is a comment. I think that there are a couple of large chickapin oaks on the west side of the city county building. Thank you for that. And Jerry would like to know, what do the flowers of the parasol tree and the Persian ironwood look like?
They're really kind of insignificant, but the seeds are something that are quite big and showy. So you'll see. So here's these guys. This was too late in the season, but if you see these areas that are brown, those are areas that have a large amount of seeds in them. I can't remember what the blossom looks like. I really can't. So sorry, I can't answer that question. You'll have to come in the springtime and take a look and see when that is. We have some tree walks scheduled for over at the Botanical Garden. And the first one is on the 20th of February. There won't be an awful lot of things blooming, but we'll talk about what plants we can. It's at 10 o'clock. It's on a Saturday. The next one is April 11th. And again, it's a Saturday and 10 o'clock in the morning. Going to have one in July 10th, 7/10. Again, 10 o'clock in the morning. And then one in October. So I'll be the one that leads you around the area and talk about the garden. There's a lot of interesting plants that aren't necessarily trees or woody plants. There's a whole area that we planted near the Ash Garden this fall that has a pretty extensive azalea collection. And we're just really lucky to have that as a resource. And I hope that everybody has an opportunity to go. It's a great place.
Does the Persian ironwood have little catkins like an American ironwood, or is it something very different?
It's really different, Jerry. It doesn't, the flowers are relatively small and kind of a deep purple. But I don't recall seeing a catkin of any kind on them. So, you know, or there's one that's, shoot. There's a hop hornbeam that would be in that same kind of the same species. That's an ironwood, but you don't get those big seed pods like you would see on the hornbeam tree.
Let's see. So yes, that Trees Knoxville, I will be getting together with the Botanical Gardens or Dan to let you know when those tree walks are. I will post them in our newsletter, so you can subscribe. If you don't subscribe to the newsletter, that's where most of our information goes out, and I put that out once a month. We also put announcements on the Facebook page, but you know, Facebook, if you're not looking at your feed all the time, it's easy to miss things. So the newsletter is probably the best way, and I always post things on our website too. There's a little section called Things to Do, Happenings, something like that, and it's I'll post any upcoming events. Do we have, again, all the thank yous over here? There's lots of thank yous, Dan, and everyone, you are very welcome. I'll let even Dan say that. Is there any, let's see, great, would like to see those dates again. I wrote some of them down, Lee.
I can go through them again. I should have.
That's okay, we'll get that out. We'll get that out. February, you said February 20th, April 11, July 10, and then you said sometime in October.
October 23.
23.
They charge $5 if you're a non-member with the garden. If you're a member, it's free. So trying to encourage membership. One thing about the Botanical Garden is that it's a nonprofit. It's not supported by the city or the state or the county. we just rely on everybody having a membership and then people that will make donations. So really important that people believe in the garden and have a membership. It's how we could stay alive. So really, really great. I'd like to thank everybody for coming by. I know it's a great night for the Buckeyes, if you happen to be a Buckeye fan. There is a Buckeye tree right across from the dove tree on the right hand side of the trail, if you're really interested. And so there you go. We're right up with the news of the day. I don't know if Florida doesn't have a tree. They just got gators. You can be a gator
They do have
hater.
gators. Lots of and lots of real alligators. So we do have another tree talk. This will be a Trees Knoxville, not to be confused with the City Tree Board, but Trees Knoxville, we will be hosting Diane Warwick. She is one of our area foresters with the Tennessee Division of Forestry, and she will be talking about healthy trees, healthy lives. I believe how trees affect our, the benefits of trees, how that affects our health. And the next City of Knoxville's tree talk there'll be one in February, and I don't have for certain, but we discussed that the title will be something about winter tree identification. And of course, as usual, we'll get that information out to you as fast as we can. So as far as upcoming events, that's what we have for now. We will, Trees Knoxville, I believe we will be having a tree planting at the end of the month. So if you want to volunteer for that, please keep your check your email. And another thing, I know that this isn't a Trees Knoxville thing, but since I have the floor, I'm going with it. Why not? And Dan had talked about some things, like one of the trees, I believe it was like the yellowwood, when it was all, you saw the branches going like this. And that one's not a true co-dominant stems kind of thing, but if you don't know what that term is, you should join our volunteer forestry classes and learn all these great terms so you can better know about trees. And Trees Knoxville, we are working on putting some more classes together. And we apologize for the ones getting canceled in January. So, but we're working hard to put some new ones together for you. Are there, again, lots of thank yous. And are there any other questions? Well, if there's no more questions, we'll go ahead and end the talk, and I will get this on our, oh, wait, Jerry's got his hand up.
No, I'd say waving goodbye.
Waving goodbye.
Thank you, Dan.
You're welcome. And I'll get this on our YouTube channel as soon as we can. And again, it'll be on the Trees Knoxville website. So again, thank you for being here. Thank you for joining the Knoxville Tree Board. And thank you, Dan, for giving us all that great information. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.